My name is HFY, and I am, or rather, was a xenobiologist for the Kethmoran Collective. I specialized in first contact protocols and species analysis, a position that had always filled me with pride. My pale blue skin and elongated limbs marked me as one of the more intellectual castes among my people, and my 4 eyes allowed me to perceive electromagnetic spectrums that most species couldn't even imagine. In my 3 decades of service, I had never encountered a species that truly challenged my understanding of life in the galaxy. That was before I heard about the humans. When the assignment came through, I was in my laboratory analyzing tissue samples from a newly discovered fungal collective on Kepler 442b. The communication crystal pulsed with urgent blue light, indicating a priority message from the collective council itself. HFY, my supervisor, Elder Vorthake, had said in his usual monotone when I activated the crystal, report to my office immediately. We have a situation. I had never heard Vorthake use the word situation before. In all my years under his guidance, everything had been classified as either routine analysis or standard evaluation. A situation implied something beyond our normal parameters. His office was a sterile white chamber lined with crystalline data matrices, each one containing the complete biological and cultural profiles of the 847 species currently in the collective database. Vorthake stood behind his desk, his 6 arms moving in the complex patterns that indicated deep contemplation among our kind. A new species has been discovered in the Outer Rim territories. He began without preamble. Bipedal, mammalian, calling themselves humans. They have achieved faster-than-light travel, which automatically qualifies them for collective membership evaluation. I felt my secondary hearts flutter with excitement. First contact with a new FTL-capable species was rare, occurring perhaps once every few decades. To be chosen for such an assignment was the pinnacle of xenobiological achievement. What makes this assignment special, Elder? I asked, though I suspected I already knew. Vorthake's posture suggested this was anything but routine. The preliminary reports are unprecedented, he said, his voice carrying undertones of uncertainty that I had never heard before. This species exhibits contradictory behavioral patterns that defy our standard classification systems. They are simultaneously cooperative and aggressive, logical and emotional, fragile and resilient. Most disturbing of all, they appear to form emotional bonds with other species. I felt my breathing apparatus stutter. Interspecies emotional bonding was considered a severe psychological disorder among civilized races. The very concept was disturbing to most council members. Furthermore, Vorthake continued, they have a documented history of both creating and destroying on scales that seem impossible for a species of their apparent technological level. They have weapons capable of sterilizing entire planets, yet they also create art forms that somehow affect the emotional centers of other species who view them. He gestured to one of the data matrices, which began projecting holographic images. I saw creatures that looked deceptively fragile, bipedal, with only 2 eyes, minimal natural armor, and no obvious weapons. Yet the accompanying data showed them surviving in environments that would kill most collective species, lifting objects many times their body weight and displaying tactical intelligence that rivaled our best military minds. They have been classified as Category 7, unpredictable, Vorthake said. In our database of 847 species, only 12 have ever received this classification. Of those 12, 3 are extinct, 5 are quarantined, and 4 required extensive military intervention to integrate into the collective. The implications were staggering. Category 7 species were the most dangerous encounters in xenobiological history, not because they were necessarily hostile, but because they were impossible to predict or control. Elder, I said carefully, why have I been chosen for this assignment? Vorthake's 4 eyes focused on me with an intensity that made my skin tingle. Because, HFY, you are the only xenobiologist in the collective who has successfully integrated 3 Category 6 species without military intervention. If anyone can understand these humans, it is you. I had studied hundreds of species throughout my career. The gas-breathing floramids with their crystalline thought patterns that operated on quantum principles. The hive-minded Zephyrians who communicated through biochemical signals so complex they required specialized translation equipment. The ancient void walkers who existed partially in subspace and could manipulate matter at the molecular level. Each had presented unique challenges, but I had found ways to understand them, to predict their behaviors, to integrate them peacefully into our galactic civilization. But humans? As I reviewed the preliminary data over the following weeks, I began to understand why they had been classified as unpredictable. Their history was a chaotic mixture of breathtaking achievements and devastating failures. They had gone from discovering fire to splitting atoms in mere millennia. They created poetry that somehow transcended species barriers while simultaneously developing increasingly efficient methods of warfare. My research station was positioned in the neutral zone between human and collective space, a small installation equipped with the most advanced xenobiological equipment available. For weeks, I pored over every scrap of data we had gathered, their chaotic history, their tendency toward both remarkable creativity and devastating warfare, their strange pack-bonding behaviors that extended even to other species, their apparent ability to adapt to almost any environment. The more I learned, the more fascinated and terrified I became. These humans seemed to operate on principles that contradicted everything I knew about evolutionary biology and species development. They were simultaneously the most cooperative and most violent species we had ever encountered. They formed emotional bonds with creatures that couldn't possibly reciprocate, yet somehow these bonds seemed to be mutual. Then came the day I would meet one face-to-face, and everything I thought I knew about life in the universe would change forever. The human ship was crude, where collective vessels were elegant curves of living metal that flowed like water through space, growing and adapting to their environment through biomechanical symbiosis. The human craft was all angles and thrust vectors. It looked like someone had taken geometric shapes and welded them together with little regard for aesthetic harmony. The hull was covered in what appeared to be weapons systems and redundant armor plating, giving it the appearance of a predator that had armored itself for battle. Most disturbing of all, it looked like it had been built for war, then hastily retrofitted for exploration. Scorch marks along the hull suggested it had seen actual combat, and the various modifications bolted onto its surface spoke of a species that adapted their technology through brute force rather than elegant design. Research Station Keth Moran 7, this is the U.S. Wanderer requesting permission to dock, came the transmission through the quantum communication array. The voice was rough, carrying undertones I couldn't quite categorize. There was something almost musical about it, despite its harsh edges. Human vocal cords, I realized, were capable of producing a far wider range of sounds than most species. I checked my instruments 3 times before responding. My breathing apparatus was functioning normally, my skin temperature was stable, and my 4 hearts were beating in perfect synchronization. I was prepared for this. I had studied their language patterns, their cultural customs, their expected behavioral responses. This was just another first contact, albeit with an unpredictable species. Permission granted, U.S. Wanderer, I responded, though my hands trembled slightly as I activated the docking clamps. I am xenobiologist HFY of the Keth Moran Collective. I will be conducting your species evaluation for potential integration into our galactic civilization. A pause. Then something that sounded like laughter? The sound was unlike anything in my experience, not the harmonic resonance of Flormid amusement or the chemical hiss of Zephyrian humor, but something entirely organic and spontaneous. Well, that's a new one, came the reply, and I could hear genuine amusement in the voice. Usually we're the ones doing the evaluating. Looking forward to meeting you, HFY. Fair warning though, I'm told I'm not great at formal protocol. The casual tone unsettled me more than any threat could have. Where was the formal ceremony? The respectful distance maintained by civilized species during first contact? The careful exchange of credentials and cultural references that established proper hierarchies?